You listen to every word I say, every verb you heard. I spray snaps a bird to bray. You try to hover me a roast, a fake, a flag, then a run a toast post. I'm the most. DEF's how it goes. Good.
I may host that. Who are you?
Who am I? Actually, that's the question. What am I is a better question.
Wait for that one.
Who am I? Well, I guess me as an individual I'm from Canada. I'm a wife, which actually I don't believe is a actual thing. It's just a name for a geographic region. But who I really am, who I believe I am, or what I'm passionate about, is in freedom. And I think freedom is what is the most important thing to really move humanity to something much better than what we've ever seen in the last 6,000 years that we know of, and that's all we really know about recorded history.
What are you?
What am I? God, I beat you to the punch on that one.
Yes,
what
you did.
I? That's a deep question. I think we don't know anything, really. There is facts, there is logical things, there is rationality, but we don't know what life is. No one knows what life is. Anyone who tells you they know what life is lying. Unless they have some sort of knowledge that we have no idea what they're talking about, which is probably highly unlikely. We don't know what life is. We don't even know what we are. But what I do know is what I see and what I feel. And what I see and feel is that humanity is all one. It's all one energy. And the best way for us to interact with each other is nonviolently.
Why are you an anarchist?
I think we're all anarchists. We're all born anarchists. You don't see any babies come out of the womb and say they want to create socialized healthcare. People are born free. You don't see any babies come out of the womb. You don't see any 2-year-olds saying, I don't like that black baby. These are all ideas that are ingrained in them through society. So all of these things are ideas. Socialism, statism especially. This whole idea, which I think really gained strength in the 20th century, was socialism and basically communism. And it's an idea that we're not individuals and that we all have to do something for the group collectivized. And the idea that they came up with is we have to have these oppressors, these people in government, who make everyone equal. But we can all be equal in a sense. We can all have equal opportunities without having to use violence. And it won't turn out in a world where everyone's equal. In a world where everyone is equal would be a really boring place to be. Everyone would be the best basketball player. Everyone would be the best baseball player. It'd be fairly boring. I wouldn't want to see that. What I would like to see is for people to reach their ultimate potential individually. And by allowing them to do that without forcing them to be equal with other people, and now we're starting to see that in the schools. We're starting to see the school system, especially this new core thing going on in the U.S. They're trying to make everyone, you're equal. So even if you failed on the test, no, you got an A. Everyone gets an A. And you can imagine, I know, in poker, for example, if you have a poker game and you pass out the chips and everyone plays poker, and at the end of the hand, no matter who won, all the chips go back to everybody, that poker game would, first of all, be incredibly boring. But second of all, everyone would suck at poker because they'd have no real need or desire to improve themselves, because no matter how good they were, they'd get the same amount of chips.
The situation is like this. They hired our parents to destroy the world, and now they'd like to put us to work in rebuilding it, and to add insult to injury at a profit.
The word profit is really interesting, because profit is a good thing. But yes, the entire system that we now know today is completely screwed up. So what you just described was a lot of people in the last century created this sort of world that we now have to unfortunately live in. And this world was a sick idea that we're going to steal from the children to try to make it so everyone is equal, which is a crazy idea. So all these concepts, and they're all collapsing now, and trying to live within these constraints of this idea make no sense anymore. All these ideas are collapsing. Thanks to the internet now, people have access to information. People can do whatever they want with their lives, but they're still constrained by these status ideas. They're constrained by government, taxation, rules, regulations, all enforced by gun. Mao said that government, it comes out of a barrel of a gun, and that's what it is. It's violence. And anytime you have a violent system that also has theft as its basis, which is taxation, you're going to have a violent and theft-based society, because that's the kind of system that people live in. It's a completely twisted, bizarre idea. It was an experiment in many ways, and it's all going away right now.
Are you looking forward to the collapse?
I am in some ways, and in some ways I'm not. What I believe is going to happen is we're going to see a complete collapse of all of these systems that have been built up over the last 100 years. It's just been 100 years since the Federal Reserve System. It's just been basically 101 years since taxes were instituted in the U.S. So it's really only been in the last 100 years we've had this system. And some people don't believe it, but it could have been a million times better than it was. It was actually pretty good because there was so much advances brought on by the private enterprise and free markets and technologies and things like these cameras we have and things like the internet and everything. All the good things we have in life came from the private enterprise. But all the bad things were the squandered wealth, which most people can't see. Things through inflation, counterfeiting of money, of the money supply, have destroyed economies. So no matter how good you might think life is today, it actually probably would have been much, much better without these systems. So in that sense, and these systems are getting worse and worse. Everyone can see this now. If you have your eyes open, every year it gets worse and worse. It's more of a police state. It's more fascism. It's more communism. So yes, I will be quite happy when this system dies. However, the transition from that point forward to the next system, which hopefully, if we spread this message far enough, will be a free system, will be very dangerous. And a lot of people are going to get hurt. And that is all caused by statism and collectivism in government. And many people will try to blame it on the free market. And that's what they always do. But I think if we can get this information out there far enough, and enough people understand it, when the collapse happens, we will have the hope that we will have a system and actually an asystem, a non-system, that is just free market individuals around the world doing voluntary transactions and not using violence to coerce others and not stealing money from others, which is called taxation. And so yes, it's a funny thing because I know it's coming. No one can stop it now. This will happen. If you look at all the numbers, you look at all the debt, the amount of debt of total worldwide debt in 2008 was $70 trillion. It's now $100 trillion. That's 6 years later. This system is going down. No matter what anyone tries to do, it's going down. Even myself, if I tried to, I'm not speeding up the collapse of the system. It's going to collapse on its own. What we need to do, though, is to get people to understand why that system was bad, why it collapsed, and then once it collapses, how we can create a better way of life for the most people possible.
Should anarchists organize?
Yeah, it's a funny question. Should anarchists organize? Because, of course, at its very core, anarchy is individualism. And you see that all the time. This is one of the main reasons why anarchism has never really caught on too much. Because anarchists in general don't like to get together in groups and force their will on others. And of course, I definitely don't want them to force their will on others. But I think, yeah, definitely organization makes sense. I think by spreading of ideas, getting together in groups of people who voluntarily want to be there, and coming up with certain ways that we can get this information out there non-violently, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Is there a symbolic meaning of Bitcoin for you?
Symbolic. Yeah, when I first heard about Bitcoin, I was incredibly excited because I know the US dollar is going to collapse. And that's what I write at the Dollar Vigilante, is about the coming collapse of the US dollar and all fiat currency systems. And even up until about 4 years ago, people would ask me, they would say, what's going to take its place? And I always said, I'm sure the private enterprise, the free market, will come up with a solution. And up until that point, there was really only two well-known solutions that were free enterprise, or a market solution. That was gold and silver. So when I heard about Bitcoin, I was incredibly excited because that came out of private enterprise. That came out of the free market, so-called free market, because nothing on earth today is completely free because there's so many unfree organizations called governments, mafias, that are coercing and using violence against people. So yes, there's so many facets of Bitcoin that I'm excited about, and I'm excited about every single facet of them. But one of them is that it is a completely decentralized currency that not one person or organization or group can control. And that is, to me, incredibly exciting. We've lived, not many people know this. Many people who are watch the news and listen to the government think that money of today, that Federal Reserve note in their pocket with the all-seeing eye of the triangle with the all-seeing eye, and it says Federal Reserve note on it, which means it's debt, which it is. They think that's money, and it's just a piece of paper that has no intrinsic value, and that just has pictures of criminals painted on it. They think that's money. This has been going on for 100 years now, so many people don't understand what's money. But because I've looked into it, I understand what money should be, or could be. It should be something that's no one person can control, that you can't inflate, and Bitcoin is very limited in its inflation. Eventually we'll have no inflation, and is for that reason, very sound. And so yes, there's a million reasons that I'm excited about Bitcoin. I think, when the internet first came out, I thought that was I called it the new Jesus. Like, people call Jesus, oh, Jesus came here to save us. Whatever you want to say about Jesus, but Jesus was an anarchist, by the way. But I said this is as big as Jesus in terms of freeing the people, because the internet allowed the complete transmission and communication of information for the first time in human history globally. So amongst all humanity, almost all humanity. Bitcoin is the first money that is created by the market, that is completely decentralized. No one can control it currency. Even gold and things like that, to some extent, can be controlled because it's hard. This is outside of the ability of any one entity to control it, because it's not hard. It's just numbers. It's just math. And I call the internet a revolution, or actually I call it an evolution in communications. And for the same reason, I say Bitcoin is an evolution in money.
What do you think of the Bitcoin conspiracy that the US government developed it alongside tracking technology in order to move into the age of a cashless society where every transaction can be tracked?
I've heard that conspiracy theory, and a lot of people call me a conspiracy theorist. That's one of the craziest conspiracy theories I've ever heard. And there's a number of reasons for it. Number one, it's open source software. So there's no back-end door on it. There's been millions of programmers around the world who have looked at the Bitcoin code, and there's no back-end door on the end of it that says, oh, the CIA can just take it at any point or control it. There's no way to control it, and there'd be no reason for the government to even want to do something like that, because before Bitcoin there was no cryptocurrencies. So why would the government, of all people, come out with the biggest risk or biggest enemy to government and central banks in history than Bitcoin, and actually create it before the free market created it? It makes no sense whatsoever. Anyone who thinks that has gone a little too deep in thinking that the government controls everything. The government doesn't control everything. The elites, the power elites, the financial elites, they do control a lot of things, but they're not incredibly intelligent. They are very power hungry. They will use violence to keep people in line. But they're not coming up with these amazing. Bitcoin was an amazing new advance in technology. It was mind-blowing. And government doesn't do anything technologically mind-blowing. You just have to look at healthcare.gov to see how the government's IT systems work. These guys are always 10 or 20 years behind the times. And I said the same thing with the internet. When the internet first came out in 1993, for the most people, by 1995 I said, I can't believe the government hasn't realized what a risk it is to them yet. And it wasn't even until the last few years that they finally figured out that the internet is a massive risk to all their power structures. And that's because people have access to information. That's how the government kept people in control for all these years. The word government, there's two parts to it. It's old Greek or Latin word. Govern is control, and government is mind. It's mind control. And John Kerry just recently said that it's getting really hard to govern these people with the internet. And so they're just figuring it out now. And I've met many of these Bilderbergers, CFRs, all these really just horrendous controlling power freaks, and they're really not that smart. They're very good at what they do, and that's controlling people. But now technology is moving humanity past their ability to control us. And as long as we can keep moving technology forward, we will outgrow, I think it's almost like an evolution of humanity. First we had things like kings and queens that grew into government. I think the next level is going to be 7 billion governments on Earth.
The individual cannot bargain with the state. The state recognizes no coinage but power, and it issues the coins itself.
Well, it's funny because in the U.S. Constitution, which a lot of people seem to think is some holy grail of a document, and first of all, the U.S. Constitution, the exact same Constitution, almost word for word, is in North Korea. They had the same Constitution in Soviet Russia. They had the same Constitution in Communist China. It all said the same things. You have these rights to free affiliation, free speech. It's just a piece of paper. This idea of a constitution is an old idea and a ridiculous idea. And to think that your rights to own your own body and to not have someone aggress against you depends on a piece of paper is ludicrous. And it's a nice idea, sure, but we've tried it. As humanity, we've tried it dozens or hundreds of times. It's turned out today, just like the U.S. The U.S. started with this document that a lot of people still, because they memorized, their brainwashed from TV and school, and their Pledge of Allegiance, which this used to be the Pledge of Allegiance sign until the Nazi came around. They believed that this was their forefathers. I also love that word, forefathers. These aren't my fathers. Sure, maybe genetically I might have some of their blood somehow got passed on to me, but those aren't my fathers. And to think that those are our forefathers, that's a very almost religious idea. Like Jesus is our father. I'd accept Jesus more than I accept forefathers. And they created this document, which today has created the most oppressive, dangerous organization in the history of the world. The U.S. government at this point can blow up the world 100 times over. They even have ideas about blowing up the moon with all their nuclear bombs. This was all created by that document. So forget about those documents. And they always say things like social contracts. I love that one. Well, you have to listen to them. That's our social contract. To me, a contract is something you agreed to. I never agreed to a social contract, and neither did any person in the USA. And so that is not a contract. That is just something that the power elites have said to keep the sheeple in line and to make it so they don't realize that they've been completely enslaved.
Do you think you're being harsh to say that the way America is today is because of the Constitution, isn't it, in spite of the Constitution?
Not at all, because that is the document that was at the beginning of the U.S. Without that, there wouldn't be a U.S. government at this point in time, which would be much better. So yeah, it's 100%. These documents mean nothing unless people agree to them by contract. So if you have a group of people who live in a certain geographic area, and they all, every single one, and I mean every single one, 100% of them, all agree to sign the document, and all of them sign, not social contract, they actually sign that I will adhere to these rules. I am completely fine with that, and I think that's fine. But that is not what government ever does. Democracy, even the founding fathers of the U.S., they were not for democracy. They were very against it. But today it's all been skewed that democracy is what the U.S. is all about. The founding fathers, again, would laugh at that idea. The U.S. was actually created as a republic. But the biggest problem is when you create these things, which are mostly just a piece of paper and an idea, and you allow yourself to you allow people to have power that they otherwise wouldn't. This always, and this throughout human history, once someone has power, it creates nothing but horrible, horrible things. Every single bad thing that government's ever done is because people have, whether by consent or by just not doing anything about it, have allowed them to have that control. And in the 20th century alone, over 200 million people were killed by their own governments. The Lord of the Rings, the movie, the entire movie, J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote the books that got turned into the movie, said that he was an anarchist. And you can tell by reading the book that that ring of power that no one could handle was the ring of power. It was the ring, once you give someone a right to have power over you, or even consent to it, or don't fight against them having that power, you always get tyranny. And that's what we're seeing all over the world today.
If we cannot bargain, what do we do?
Bargain with who?
The government.
I don't believe in bargaining with the government. I believe in spreading these ideas, and these ideas are spreading like wildfire right now. In the early 20th century, the communists were like the anarchists of today. They were in their back rooms, they were a small group of people, they're talking about these ideas. Hey, what if we all, one for all, to each unto their own, to each, whatever the communist phrase was, the ridiculous phrase. And those ideas caught on, and it went wildfire. And the whole 20th century was basically socialist century, which is basically communism. And I believe that this century, thanks to the internet, the ideas of freedom are going to spread like wildfire. And I don't think we need more than 10% of the population to understand these ideas for the majority of the population to turn away from government completely. And I don't think it's going to have to come down to any sort of violence. This is the beautiful thing, and this is what is beautiful about anarchy, is it is a completely peaceful philosophy. If people don't aggress against you, you don't aggress against them. And so I don't believe that anarchists can ever win using violence. And I think we will win, even without using violence. And wouldn't that be the most beautiful thing, that this philosophy, this ideology of never initiating force, actually comes to fruition throughout no initiation of force. And you can actually look at people like Gandhi. Gandhi wasn't an anarchist, but he was very close to it. He was more of a pacifist. So if someone beat him up, he wouldn't even fight back. And I don't agree. He can do that. That's fine if he wants to do it. I don't want to do that. If someone aggresses against me, I will protect myself. However, I will never initiate violence against others. And Gandhi, to that extent, was pretty much an anarchist. And he overthrew the entire British Empire by himself. Of course, he got through his ideas, he overthrew the entire British Empire, Gandhi. So
the idea of anarchy will eat away at the foundations of the state, ideally.
It's a matter of, if enough people believe, not even believe, I don't like to use that word, if enough people understand these ideas, they will so quickly, and we're seeing it happen all over the world right now, we're seeing secessionist movements happening almost daily. Almost daily. I just saw 3 today. Some in Eastern Europe. I saw another one, and I can't remember the name right now. It was some obscure place. All secessionist movements. So we're seeing people being disillusioned with the statist system now, all over the world. Quebec. There's secessionist movements in Texas, California, Colorado. So this is the funny thing for anarchists is, if we want to sort of transition to an anarchist world, we actually need more governments. And of course the antithesis of that is a one world government, where there's only one government. And that's what really the statists are trying to do right now. So if we can just get more and more governments, then we will slowly be moving towards anarchy, because of course, if the U.S. went back to 50 states, which is how it was originally founded, it's just all the states were equal states, which sounds crazy to a lot of Americans now, which is funny. Oh, what if we made every state its own country? It's like, you're crazy, you're not an American. That was what the whole basis was. But if we can get a lot of these secessionist movements, and I always say, at first you don't secede, try again. And it's happening all over the world. There's an awakening going on. And we're going to see more and more people trying to break off. And we're also going to see the big states like Russia, US, what we're seeing in Crimea right now in Ukraine. These are all power controls of these big, giant states. But more and more people are trying to break off from them. And the more that we can see that happen, and the more they break off, eventually we'll get down to every state in every country is its own country. And then every city in every state is its own country. And then eventually every person is its own sovereign individual. And this will end up in the most peaceful and prosperous time in human history.
Respond to people who shout, "Prove anarchy works."
I love it when statists or collectivists, which is almost everyone but anarchists, tell us to prove it works. Because there's nothing but proof that statism and collectivism doesn't work. We've seen hundreds of millions killed by their own government, chaos all the time, financial systems collapsing, which are all statist contraptions, and all these statists and collectivists will never allow us to even have one small area. I know billionaires, we've been trying to buy parts of countries and let them allow us to have a very anarchist area. They won't allow it. And I think there's two reasons to it. One, fear. They think that what we're talking about is scary. And they might be right from their mindset, because we're talking about something very different than anything they've ever done before. So to that, they're scared. Secondly, some of them know if they allow true freedom anywhere in the world, that place will become the most prosperous place and most peaceful place on earth in a matter of years. You can take a place, and I'm talking to countries in Africa right now. If we can just have a small part of that country, just say, allow us to be sovereign, don't come in and attack us, at least for a couple of years, just give us a couple of years, and we're not going to have any laws, or no regulations, we're not going to have any taxes, and within a couple of years, whatever area, and you can put it in any place you want, it would become Hong Kong within a couple of years. And the thing is, and this is interesting, is if we could somehow just get some place to do that, pretty soon some people would try to probably attack it. All the states around it would want to attack it. But by that point, this area would be so wealthy that they would have private armies, private militia, private nuclear bombs if they want. And they wouldn't be able to do it. We just need a place for just a short amount of time, a couple of years, because it will increase wealth so massively that it will become the new it'll be the shining star on earth, and you'll see places happening all over the place at that time. They won't be able to stop it at that point. In actuality, I think they can't stop it at this point. I think it's over. The game is over. We've won. It's going all in one direction. The states, collectivism, statism, taxation, regulation, it's all dying. And the idea of freedom is growing tremendously. We've already won. It's just going to be interesting to see how this transition transpires.
I'm going to give you a series of statements. Respond to them in any way you like. Anarchy is order.
Anarchy is order. The funny thing about that statement, that anarchy is order, is that people think it's chaos. And a lot of this has been spread by the government. Whenever there's chaos, which is caused by statism, people revolting against some statist idea, they say, look, that's anarchy. It's not. Anarchy is disorder in a way, but it's organized disorder. It's a million people doing all their own things, and there's no system to it. But if you let it happen, and this has happened many times over human history, it creates this beautiful organized disorder.
Government is cyclical instability.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. When you're talking about cyclical, you can't have the state start before there's any wealth. If there's a bunch of broke people and they don't produce anything, and you say we're going to have a government and we're going to, tax you on this and give this guy's money to that other guy, and no one has any money, it doesn't start. So it is cyclical, and usually that's the way it's been throughout human history. Is there's freer areas, they create wealth, and then they get this crazy idea of government, and they just start tearing it down again. So even like Rome was one of them. Rome was amazing. If you've ever been to Rome, it's the architecture and the things they had 2,000 years ago was unbelievable. And then they just ruined government until it all got destroyed, and then everyone had to run to the barbarian lands. And this has happened all throughout history.
Chaos begets freedom.
Chaos totally begets freedom, because chaos really means that there is no structural order. Humanity and humans want to have voluntary transactions. Your average person doesn't want chaos. I don't want chaos. I'm sitting here in this room. I don't want riots going on around me. I'd much prefer to pay for my drink and pay for my cigarette voluntarily at a price that we agree upon. I want order in that sense. But I don't want it to be instituted or used by violent people, which is what government is, to tell me what the price of something has to be. All things, I think the biggest answer to that question about chaos and the fear of it is people need to have more faith in other human beings. I think people believe, and some people, not all people, believe that without people with guns standing there, it'd be just looting and pillaging and rioting. That is not the case. There's thousands of cases where there hasn't been a really effective government. Somalia is one of them, and a lot of people like to bring that up. Somalia is one of the most, it's been one of the best performing areas of that part of Africa for the last 20 years because they haven't really had much of a government there. Now it's still Africa. There's still a lot of people who still haven't really learned a lot of great skills, and they haven't learned these ideas yet. But the true chaos comes from government.
Suggested reading: one fiction, one nonfiction, and a third of your choice.
One fiction, well, that's easy, Lord of the Rings. And I read that before before I knew what anarchy was. And once you're an anarchist, once you understand these ideas, that book is beautiful. I've read it now dozens of times. I've watched the movies dozens of times. Nonfiction, that's a good one. I'm going to pick a really simple one. It's very small. It's very thin. You can read it in about 3 hours. It's called The Market for Liberty. And basically what they outline is if there was no government and there was anarchy, how people would self-organize to create solutions for things like courts, security, and it's amazing. It blows your mind at how the free market could come up with so much better solutions to all these things. Things like Judge.me, which is an internet site where you can actually go for arbitration. So if you do a contract with somebody, you can put in the contract, if we both disagree, we go to Judge.me, which is an internet site, which is not a government court. Millions of things like that. So that's why I really like The Market for Liberty. And you said another book?
Third of your choice.
Of my choice. I don't read a lot of books. We're in an age now where I read millions of articles every year. Not millions, but like countless articles. I'm just constantly reading articles. I find everyone has ADD now, but I don't think it's an actual disease. I think it's just a result of so much information in our lives that if I see a book like this, I just don't have the time. I'm busy. I'd rather read a few articles, a few shorter synopsises of those articles. I'm trying to think of any book that I would recommend. I can't think of any, but I would recommend definitely websites and any free market oriented website, and read all the great free market thinkers, and many of them I'm sure you're going to be interviewing, like Jeffrey Tucker, write amazing stuff almost every day, and that's the stuff that I really like to read. I guess the only things that I would say that really, and I haven't fully read them, but I've read almost every chapter of them over time with people like Murray Rothbard. I think he really outlined how anarcho-capitalism could and would work, and all the reasons why people should look to this philosophy.
You know, sneaks are small these days in the road by the wall. Tonight, I let it all out. I've grown so tall, I'm a giant beach star. Someday I'll fall, but